All right, how's it going? Day two. All right, the hardcore stick-arounders today. I like it. Thanks for being here, even though it's a small group. My name is Joel. You may know Gensler as an architectural design firm. You may not know that we also have an in-house innovation consultancy, and so Liz and I are part of that team. Liz will introduce herself in a second. I'm a strategy director. I lead a lot of our applied research and strategic futures work across the firm and for our clients across industries. This way? A little that way, okay. Got it? Sweet, thank you. So yeah, we're going to talk to you about culture today because we really believe and are convicted by the idea that if you want to activate creativity and innovation within your organization, it really comes down to people. It comes down to behaviors and emotions and all the messiness of what it means to be a creative being these days. So we're going to get into that. This is a culmination of a few years. Oh, it's skipping ahead here for me again. A few years of research. I'm not going to get into all of the details of the process. This is, I think, 5 years of research worth that kind of culminated in this tool that we're going to share with you today. So I'm going to hit on a few things, and I'm going to hand it to Liz to give you some insights around how the tool has been working for us in terms of working with organizations to cultivate competency and capacity around innovation. So coming out of a few years of research, two big things started to emerge. The first is a set of 6 conditions of innovation. I'm not going to unpack each of these right now for sake of time. Each of these deserves its own full, long hour presentation. But what we discovered is that the organizations that were activating innovation at a human level had 6 primary characteristics. 1, authenticity. That means people could really show up and be authentic. There was no masking or hiding or trying to meet some arbitrary condition of belonging within the organizational culture. 2, autonomy, right? That they were given trust and freedom laterally to explore new ideas and to ask new questions. Curiosity was cultivated, that they empowered people to pursue things that maybe were ambiguous or unknown. Imagination, right? Obviously, the exercise of imagination, it's really about asking what could be questions rather than defaulting to this kind of what should be, which is what's often incentivized in an enterprise environment, right? Answers. Strategy, but imagination is very question-oriented. It's the pre-validation, pre-feasibility stage of thinking. Thrill, this idea that it's fun, right? That there's play involved, that it's exciting, and hope, that you believe in possibility, right? That there's an optimism for potential, and that's encouraged. We also discovered that there are 6 organizational components of culture, and culture is kind of this very nebulous thing, right? We like, what is culture anyways, and where does it come from? Well, what we were able to do in our research work was identify 6 organizational components that really become the architecture or the infrastructure of a culture itself. And so there are what we call an ecosystem of factors that you can intentionally design to actually intervene in a culture and cultivate a culture. So narratives and symbols, like what are the stories that your company tells, right? You might think about this as your employee brand or things of that sort. That's representations. Governance and influence, right? What kind of management style do you have? What's the structure? How does reporting work? Where's permission and collaboration look like? That's structures. Behaviors and rituals, right? What are the unspoken things, your norms about how you operate? And it's the non-formal policies. Targets and performance, right? These are the regulators, right? What are people held accountable to? Platforms and capital, this is resources, right? This is how people are resourced with time, money, et cetera, to actually do what they're supposed to be doing. And then finally, processes and practices. This is what we just call workflows, right? What are the processes, your tooling stack, the software that you use, how you communicate, all of the things that undergird your day-to-day work. So those are the 6 components of organizational culture as well as the 6 conditions. What we did is we developed a tool, and I'm going to skip this for sake of time as well, that brought these things together, that created this diagnostic framework for us. And I'm just going to touch on this quickly, that through dimension reduction analysis, for those of you in the data space as statisticians, what we discovered was that these were actually a great kind of place to start for just your gut check as an organization. That if you can start to think about, like, hey, do we have opportunities for people to be authentic, right? Are we empowering authenticity with resources? Are we empowering curiosity with resources? Like, do they have access to exploration, imagination, thrill, and then hope and norms, right? Are there Do new ideas actually make progress? Is there space for those ideas to grow? Are we actually investing in new ideas? Are we adopting new processes to make sure that those ideas can grow roots, right? So this is not the most important thing necessarily, but it is a good starting point in terms of just the gut check to ask yourself, do we have a culture of innovation? And if you feel like you don't have these things, like this would be a great place to kind of get started. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Liz, and she's going to dive a little bit deeper into some of the findings now after we've implemented this diagnostic tool the last year and a half or so, and what we've been learning.
Thanks. So thank you. So yeah, we tested this diagnostic in a broad panel-based survey as well as with clients across industries, and these are the findings, basically the state of innovation. And so there were some common themes that we found. One is that there are disconnects between senior leadership and staff around supporting innovation. Two, that cultures of innovation are associated with high engagement and commitment. And three, that direct investment in innovation drives desired results. So I'm going to go through each of these findings and share some of the data points that came out of it. So first, about the disconnects between senior leaders and staff. What this really means is a few things. One is that we're seeing that decision-making authority is kind of a sticking point. So more senior leaders are believing that their structures aren't exclusively top-down decision-making, whereas the rest of staff aren't necessarily aligned with that. And that might seem a little bit of a no-brainer to you, but this is really important because if only leaders are believing that there is distributed decision-making, then that's showing that it's not actually percolating down into the organization, and diverse perspectives and points of view aren't necessarily being included in the conversation and being invited to the table. So that is one disconnect that we're seeing that might be an inhibitor for innovation. The second disconnect that we're seeing is that only executives are really believing that they incentivize risk-taking. And what we mean by incentivizing is not just saying, hey, fail fast, take risks. We mean literally putting your money where your mouth is, creating the structures, the processes, so that people actually feel like they can step out, take a risk, and they won't be punished for if something doesn't work out, because that's critical on the innovation journey. So we're seeing that only executives are thinking that they're incentivizing it, but the rest of the organization is saying, not really. So that's another inhibitor for innovation that we're seeing. The third one around this leadership disconnect is that we're seeing that non-managerial staff aren't really as likely to be able to spend time developing new ideas and new initiatives outside of their core job responsibilities. So maybe it's that just executive leaders and kind of directors and managers have the time or the bandwidth to be able to be involved. And that, again, is really limiting for the types of perspectives that are going to come to the table and whether or not, again, like people are supported actually in doing innovation. You need the boots on the ground. You need the different perspectives to come to the table and be part of the conversation. So generally with these three findings, we're seeing, again, there is this leadership disconnect. A lot of leaders do believe that they're cultivating some of these conditions, but it may not actually be reaching the full organization. The second big finding here is that cultures of innovation are associated with high engagement and commitment. So we analyzed, what we did is we did a quartile analysis where we took the least engaged and the most engaged. And we defined engagement as feelings of happiness while working, feeling energized and absorbed in the work, and a willingness to exceed expectations. So when we look at the folks that are the least engaged versus the most, we see a really clear association here around having access to conditions for innovation. So bucketing some of these, we see that the most engaged report that their organizations have a larger propensity toward action. Again, it's not just talk, but they are implementing new ideas, and they are investing in new strategies, products, and services. Second, they're also experiencing the ability to experiment more. So they're able to, experiment with new ideas. They can actually spend part of their work time experimenting with new things. And then number three, which this is a common thread throughout, is that they have better access to resources. So resources to explore new concepts, and also resources to enable fun experiences. And that has to do a lot with thrill. There needs to be this element of play and this comfort in this excitement that kind of generates new ideas. So yeah, highly engaged folks are experiencing action, experimentation, and resources. And then highly committed folks, same thing with the quartile analysis. When we looked at the people that were the most committed, so looking at retention, likelihood to recommend your company, being proud to work for the company, there's also, again, a really clear association between having these conditions for innovation. So they experience things like individual appreciation. They don't feel like just a cog in the wheel, but they do see that their achievements are better acknowledged and celebrated. They're able to express their individuality. So again, they're able to kind of bring themselves to the table and feel comfortable and supported in doing so. And that leads to feeling comfortable sharing crazy ideas or not being so scared to filter what you're going to say, because that's super important for innovation. Second, they have better empowerment, autonomy, and then third, again, resources. They have the resources to do this, and we're talking, things like, time or actual capital or just permission. Resources can look like a lot of different things, but again, tangible support for spending time innovating. And then the third big finding is that direct investment in innovation drives desired results. So companies that provide resources and roles are significantly more innovative. So things like, again, access to resources for new concepts, tools and resources for fun experiences, and actually having specific roles or teams that focus on innovation. A lot of the times we see companies say, innovation is everybody's job, do it in your day-to-day. But if you're focused on keeping the lights on and checking the boxes, you're not going to have the bandwidth for it. So sometimes when there are roles or teams where you have that kind of insulation and space to focus on it, that then will lead to more innovative outcomes. So kind of following along with this, we also saw that companies with a chief innovation officer are more likely to have stronger cultures. And so what we mean by that is that they are people that have a chief innovation officer are rating their companies as more creative, as more innovative, that they have a positive perception of culture and higher job satisfaction. And so the key takeaway here is not just throw a CNO at it and all of your problems will be solved, but it's really that you need to have a dedicated role or that responsibility or those resources that are paired with it to really be able to make waves. Whenever it's everybody's job or everybody's just told to do so, it doesn't really move as far. So those are the three kind of large findings, and I'm going to hand it off to Joel for what it really means in the day-to-day.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so real quick here to wrap up. Activating innovation, scaling innovation practices to increase across the organization is probably the number one thing that you can do and should do. Implementing conditions through talent specifically is your second big thing, and then providing resources is your third big thing here. The key to a culture of innovation is intention. And so the big idea here, the thing that we want to leave you with, we know this is a ton of information, there's a bunch of stuff in here. The idea is that your culture is constituted by an ecosystem of factors that implicate human experience, and that those factors can be considered and designed intentionally. And if you approach those factors of that ecosystem with intention, and you design with intention, you can increase exponentially your innovation output. So that's the big idea. We'll leave it there because I know we're short on time. So we hope to chat with you at the Q&A. And do you have a question there? Prior slide? Yes. Oh.
And yeah, we're happy to share some examples like case studies and things like that of how we've really actively done this, but would love to share that in the Q&A and actually be able to answer specific questions for you. But yeah, happy to do that.
Thanks for having us.